Hola. Hello. We are waiting for
Hi,
Francesca, who is joining. Hey, here we are.
how are you?
You're sideways.
Oh, okay. I gotta figure this out. So I have it,
There, like that.
it's good, but then I have it, my headphones, my earbuds plugged in,
Yeah.
and
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
I
it's tricky.
I use this to like set it on, and then the ear things go here. Anyway, we'll do
Yes,
our best.
here we
Well,
are.
yes.
Hi.
Yay. That was easy, right?
Not bad, actually, not bad. And lovely to see your face.
Yes. Lovely to see you too. So here we are. Welcome everyone who's joining us. We've been looking forward to doing a live together for a while, Francesca and I.
Mhm.
And finally, our schedules coincide and we have some exciting things to share. I wanted to start out by saying how Francesca and I got connected. I uh, recognized Francesca as one of the pioneers in the end of life doula or death doula movement, especially in the realm of education. And she developed from scratch the whole program of the University of Vermont and wrote this fabulous book that I love so much, Cultivating the Doula Heart. And when I was in the middle of developing a program here in Mexico called Compassionate Accompaniment, Acompañamiento Compasivo, eh, I, I felt like I was connecting to something out there that was just like taking over my life. And I started developing this material. And then I happened upon Francesca's book right after I finished that and discovered that there was something that was so aligned with the message that we were both receiving and sharing that I immediately reached out to Francesca and said, I want to translate your book. And a little bit embarrassingly, that was in 2020. But we connected and it just felt so aligned. We were so excited to do this work together. So I started the translation with the help of some of the team of the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross Foundation in Mexico. And I was finally able to finish that idiomatic translation like a month ago or 2 months ago. So we're very excited about that. But then through this process of the translation, we started to connect about other things. We both love writing. We're both sort of very creatively inspired. And so we started to find other ways in which we were connected and supporting one another. And this year, oh my goodness, it's almost
I
going to be
know.
last year.
Yeah, almost.
Yeah. Um, Francesca put out an invitation for a retreat called Inspired Ideation. And I had that last part of the translation that I needed to get done. And I said, I need to do this and just spend that time finishing the translation, working together so that we can really iron out the little details and nuances of language. And many more things came out of that.
Mhm.
And so we're so excited to be here together.
And here we are.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. It's so lovely to go back down memory lane and think about how many years we've been connected and in how many ways and how often our paths have crossed. And both just because the fates have smiled upon it, and also then we began putting intention behind it and have been connecting in that way. So, what I love about you and being around your energy is that creative spark, that passion that comes through, and it helps to continue to reignite mine. And I know that we have that in common. And at least for me, I'm not sure about for you, Wilka, but it's not something that I really identified with initially as an adult. I think as a child, and as for most children, we are naturally just tuned into our own creativity and we don't really think about it. And then as an adult, I felt like I wasn't dancing as much. I wasn't doing art like you do when you're a kid, when you're young and you're just making up art supplies out of nature, or when you're going through art classes. I had just lost a lot of that. I also didn't really
Mhm.
consider myself to be a writer until a handful of years ago. So it's something that I have rediscovered and have found fascinating, that it was this dormant part of me that was just there, sort of waiting for my attention to return, and how beautiful it has been as an experience of rediscovering it in so many different ways. In the ways of writing, absolutely, and all that that is uncovered within me and for me, and then in other ways too. So, how about you? I wonder, have you always felt like a creative person or not?
Well, this is a very interesting thing that you bring up because I think as children, we are naturally inclined to express creatively. I
Mm-hmm.
think it is part of our nature, as is the doula heart, that this is just one of the ways in which our essence and life moves through us and expresses itself in unique ways, right? So I feel that we disconnect from that the moment that we, go into the sort of the checklist of what needs to happen in
Mm-hmm.
life, and that then we also begin to get sort of segregated into different classifications of what we may be good at or what we should be doing and all these other
Mm-hmm.
things that then I think confuse us about what is creativity to begin with, right? I think that we are creations, we're constantly evolving, and we are, so it's inherent in us, but now we're disconnected because now there are labels. And if we cannot draw a straight line or color inside the line, we're not artists anymore, or we're not
Mm-hmm.
creatives anymore. And there's the label of art, and if we can't be artists, then we better not do anything creative. And so I think that as adults we struggle very much with that because we are sort of expected to identify ourselves as this and not that, or we are identified those ways. And so to reclaim it, I guess is what we could say, but really is just kind of
Mm-hmm.
reconnecting, as you said, with something that is innate and that it doesn't have a structure. It doesn't have a particular way it should look or sound. That, yeah, that every one of us is in just essence of just existing, creating, and creative. And the other thing I want to say, um, with inspiration and intuition, that these are also parts of who we are and how we are as human beings, and that a part of this process of reclaiming or remembering or connecting, reconnecting, has to do with also reclaiming those things, right? And that it manifests not just in our writing, but in how we get inspired. But as adults, it's a challenge of when am I going to make space for this? Because it's
Mm-hmm.
also not considered a valid thing to be spending time on, right? Because if we're not in production and if we don't have an outcome and if we don't, it seems like we start to question our own impulse to express creatively.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, the making of the time is a huge hurdle for many of us, myself included, and making sure it feels like a priority to us. And, maybe not everybody will feel called to this, but I do imagine that for people who have found themselves disconnected from their own creativity, there's probably some sort of inkling in there. And we could look at it in a couple of different ways. We could look at it as a practice that is only a value for itself, and that that is enough, and that we could be playful about
Mm-hmm.
it, and that we could just engage our imaginations and go in without an agenda. It's not formal, and it's not about what we produce, like you were talking about. And then on the other hand, for some of us who consider this to be more of our life's work, then it has a slightly different angle and lane. And not everybody's going to feel like they need to explore that in that way, but that in all of our endeavors, there's some level of creativity and some level of expression of ourselves and
Exactly.
our passion that
Mm-hmm.
we can infuse. So, how are we doing that? How can we do that? Are we doing that? Is that happening? Can we increase it in some way? And I feel like that's sort of where I'm at in my own life. Is I go through periods of there may be some artistic expression that is really just from my own enjoyment. And it could be things like singing karaoke with my family. And I am a terrible singer. I would never even imagine wanting to take that to another level, or there's just like no interest in my mind. But belting out a song at home with a microphone and some lights flashing is fun. And it's some sort of artistic creative expression that can kind of come through. Or when I go to a dance class and I'm doing ballet, I'm not doing that because I think I'm going to be discovered and I'm going to end up dancing on some major stage. I'm doing it for myself and my own enjoyment, my own expression of who I feel like I am at my core. And I think it's really important that we give ourselves opportunities to do that without feeling like whatever our art is, whatever our creative modality might be, that we have to face judgment or critique from ourselves or other people. And we just feel liberated. We feel a freedom there. And then, in addition to that, for me right now, my focus creatively is writing again. But I go through seasons and I'm not always focused on producing art necessarily. Right now I am, and I'm drafting my new guidebook, which will be about community grief care. And it's coming together so beautifully. And like you talk about tapping into your intuition and finding so much trust in the process, trying to find so much trust in the process is vital, but it's going
Mm-hmm.
beautifully. And so I think having both, holding both is really important for balance.
Yeah, it makes me go back to childhood for a moment because, and even before we are able to be verbal or to even be coordinated in our movement, there's
Mm-hmm.
a way in which there's a constant exploration through expression,
Mm.
right? We don't have to do anything in particular. We, as children are just being, right?
Yes.
And as we are being, we are exploring. We have a lot of curiosity, and we explore a lot through engagement and expression, right? So as children, we are making sounds and we are moving and we are, just allowing ourselves things that later on we start to question, or that we've been told don't fit into the roles we're meant to play or supposed to play. And so there's a way in which, when you were talking about, expression has a value in and of itself that is enough.
Mm-hmm.
Just as presence and curiosity with what is, it has value in itself.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not so much about doing, but as it's a being with, right? If we are with that curiosity, and you also mentioned passion, when we connect with passion, there's something that ignites and that inspires something, but we have to be present with it before we can know what it's calling or asking of us, right? So
Mm.
what is it inviting us into? And so that, I think, is part of what requires our attention. But the moment that we feel inspired, that we take a moment to pause and notice and be with, and then see, what am I going to do with this?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Is this something that wants more expression? And then what kind of expression does it want? Or does it simply need me to move or make noise or go into the woods or whatever it is, right? So there's the connection, there's the honoring when it shows up, and I guess we have to cultivate that capacity to notice when it's showing up,
Mm-hmm.
connecting with it, and then trusting that process that it gives us. This is the other thing, because I think there are so many how-tos about everything out there now, not just about being creative or anything else, that sometimes those how-tos may not resonate with how things are going to manifest through us,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there, to trust that there is a guidance that comes with that inspiration, and then how do we cultivate that?
Absolutely. And, for me, when that inspiration strikes, I just grabbed a couple of the journals that I have, and I have one journal right now that is just, it's almost completely filled up with notes and random musings and thoughts as they arise. And this one has to do with the guidebook. And then I have a separate one that I carry around, and I try to keep them kind of light and smaller so that I can stick them in any bag that I'm carrying too, because I want to capture what comes when it comes, when I can, when it's possible. It's not always possible. And I find that for myself, if I'm too, I have to toggle between making space and being intentional about it, especially with my writing, because there can be resistance there. And I've been doing quite a bit of reading lately about the brain and how your mind works and when you're approaching work like that. And also not being too forceful, because when I am in the mindset of being too forceful, then what needs to come out and through can't. And so
Mhm.
I I've noticed from my own process that sitting down and having the discipline needed to create space for it in my life, whether it's, 30 minutes in the morning, or I have a 2 hour block, or I'm waiting to pick up my child from a sporting event and I have my journal close by and I can make some notes, whatever that is, that I find in my mind, I will be pulled to other distractions. And all of a sudden, these other to do kind of tasks feel very pressing, very important, and they're trying to pull me away from my actual creative project. And I know now, after I've done enough reading and research about it, is that our brains are meant to keep us safe. And the unknown, like with a creative endeavor, doesn't feel safe because it's unfamiliar territory. So our brains are
Mhm.
like, no, 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 come back from there, come back from there, come to what's safe and really well known and stay here. And so now that I have that awareness, I can sort of gently speak to my mind about it and recognize when that's happening. Sometimes I will let myself still attend to something because I'll know that that will decrease my nerves or increase my ability to focus. So I will actually go ahead and do that and get it over with and then really sit down for it. And when I hear that voice coming back up, I can just quiet it. Then I can say, I appreciate that, but right now, this is what I need to be doing. And I'm full of trust in this process. And this is my choice. And I sort of move forward. But when I'm in there and I'm maybe not feeling that flow, I'm feeling a little bit more stuck, or I'm feeling a little bit more just like it's sort of bumpy, or I can't find quite the right words or the right analogy or the right anecdote, then I've noticed I do need to take a breather. I need to take a break. I need to stand up. I need to go do something else. Generally, I need to move my body and I need to get
Mhm.
away from the paper or the computer for a minute, do something else. And it's like I have to get out of my own way and then it
Mhm.
can come through.
Yeah, that makes me think of a little essay I read a long time ago, and I can't tell you where it is,
Mhm.
but I do have the book. I'll find it later. It's called The Art of Wandering, and this is something that resonated with me very much whenever I first discovered it, that this journey of connecting with ourselves through a creative or expressive modality, whatever that may be for us, requires a certain balance and a level of being with and being present with, and then noticing what is arising and what is asking of us to take form, because I see it very much like something is gestating in us and we may be not even aware of it, and then all of a sudden it starts to ask to take form, and then how do we respond to that, and then how do we make the room for that and everything like that. But that also, in that process of it taking form, a lot of the structures, the ideas, the labels, the judging, the criticisms, the insecurities, this thing about with being with the unknown and the uncertain kick in. And those are the moments when walking away and wandering about actually allows also kind of a reset with coming back to being fully present,
Mhm.
right? So as you said, all of these things that get in the way, are they me? I'm not sure. Or have they been conditioned into me? For sure. So how can I then disengage from that in a creative way too, like moving
Mhm.
the body, going somewhere else, taking the mind somewhere else,
Mhm.
allowing for breathers. It has a pulse too, I
Mhm.
feel like, right? So if we force it, as you were saying, we're not letting it breathe.
Mhm.
So there's these moments of like the in breath and then the out breath
Mhm.
with it.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I find that sometimes if I go for a walk, that helps, and I know this is true for other people too, sometimes going for a drive, or sometimes even like taking a cleansing shower, something like that. And I often find that the moments that I can sort of figure out what I had been stuck within are times that I actually don't have access to a pen and piece of paper, which can initially when this was happening, I felt frustrated by it and I felt like, well, this isn't a good solution. And now I again try to cultivate more trust in the process and know that it's there and that I will be able to tap back into it. It might not be the exact phrasing, but it's there. And I find some peace with it, that it actually has been able to arise within me.
As you're talking about that, somehow I just was transported to the process of translation, which is a little bit different, but I want to bring it in because for me, when I make room to just sit with something and to let it like transform me, so sometimes the creativity comes from somewhere else and out through us, and there's a transformation that happens in that as something comes through. But when we receive something and then allow that to sort of have an effect, I find that to be like self-care for me. To sit with something that I don't have to control, and it's easier for me to say, well, it's already there. I'm just letting it sort of land in a way that then I can get a sense of the essence of it, so that then I can give it words in a different language, and then I can sit with that. It feels like a real reciprocal relationship. And I think it's the same when the inspiration is coming through us, that it is a reciprocal relationship, right? That I let it come through me, and that it inspires something, and then I give it something, and then it gives me something. And I find rest in that. It's like it's rich. It keeps me in a state of wonder about, how is this going to fully take form? But it also allows me to rest from this place of control and this place of structure, which we tend to want to do with everything that we do these days, whatever it is that we're setting out to do. And so I also think that each of us needs to find, how can we let ourselves rest in it and release a little bit of that expectation that we need to control everything about it, right? That sometimes you just have to kind of let it move through and see what even comes out, and that later we can come back to it and then, look at it from a different perspective or something, right? That it doesn't have to be perfect.
Right.
And that it's not about perfection.
Absolutely. Right. And that we don't have to have it all figured out in advance. Like, that's the wild, amazing part of creating, is that we don't know, and that we are part of it, and we're also witness to it, even though we are driving the effort or we're behind the effort. It's an evolution that is also just mysterious, and I love that. I mean, with this particular book, I had ideas about topics that I wanted to cover, but I was struggling with finding, who am I talking to? Who am I writing for? And what is my main message of this book going to be? And back when we did our inspired ideation retreat together in May, I was still waffling. I was writing, and I felt okay about exploring and just sort of seeing how it was going to take shape. And at that point, I really didn't know what the main topic was going to be. And then I also led a pretty intensive workshop related to it. And through that, and through sitting with it and contemplation and taking it on a walk, I finally found that it just sort of struck me, and it was so clear. And I kind of wondered, how did I not see this before? And that's when I really felt like I had my direction with it. But it is such a process of trust and exploration throughout.
It makes me think of how we talked about how it's an invitation into an exploration or a journey or a wandering, and that we don't know what we're going to find, right? And this is a very interesting point to think about, because we forget that to create something new, we cannot be in what we already know, right? So there's so many things that we already know. We could use that and sort of have fun with what we already know and give it a new form, but that's not creating something new. But when we are in the process of creating something new, we have to cultivate our capacity to be in what we don't already know, right? So it is what we don't know. It's uncertain, unfamiliar. It's dark even sometimes. And the forms that come out we are not even sure how that makes sense. But that's how the new gets gestated and then takes form. So that this is a process of daring to go to the fringe of what we already know.
Absolutely. And it's uncomfortable. And I think often we do resist what feels uncomfortable, and we want to be where it's safe and familiar. And I think it's so important that we recognize that, and that we do push our edges a bit to see what's there, to just check it out.
Yeah, I just have to name the fact that there's so much that is so connected with the work that we do with supporting in the space of end of life, and the work we do in cultivating our capacity to allow for creativity to fully take form, right? There are definitely some parallels, and I feel like they're related somehow.
I completely agree. I think that when we step into death care, even when we step into educating about death care, there's so much that's unknown. We cannot anticipate, even if we have some sort of plan or agenda set up previously in our minds, we cannot fully anticipate how it's going to unfold. We cannot. And so still stepping in, still leaning in, and still showing up is a huge act of courage and curiosity. And we have to have both. We have to engage both. And then that's where that's the medicine. That's the stuff. That's the connection. That's where healing comes from. That's where people that we're serving might actually be able to trust in themselves more, and might be able to find that curiosity and that courage within themselves to also say, I know I can't have this all figured out. I know that I cannot fully control what's happening, and yet here I am. And so what are we going to do with it?
Yeah, it makes me think of, that cultivating the capacity to trust that there's a process that is going to guide us is the same in both realms. But the other thing that I'm thinking is, how for me, sort of this cultivating intimacy with the unknown, with the unfamiliar, with those invitations into discovering. I think it's the most exciting part of being alive, whether it's in the process of creating or it's in the process of accompanying in those vulnerable spaces of grieving and dying, that there's a surrender that is required. It's almost like a courtship, right? Something is showing up that wants our attention, and we are curious about it, and so we want to enter into relationship with it. But there is something about it that we can never control, and that in fact is going to be what guides us, and even what supports us in discovering something new in ourselves. And I see also a parallel there with both.
There's such purity in that, in those moments, in those connections. It's the most pure part of living, is being witness, being present, being supportive of people through their process when they feel so vulnerable and potentially worried or potentially curious about what's happening. And also, I find that for me, with my writing, I think that the reason that I felt compelled to start writing was not because I grew up planning to become an author. It was because these realms that we work within are so complex, they're so layered, that I needed it for my own process of coming to terms, of coming to any sense of clarity, coming to and find any meaning throughout it, having more of having a deeper understanding myself of the work. I needed to write about it. So it was just as much for me as it was to honor the people that I have continued to learn from, and the experiences that I've learned from, and to try to help facilitate that process for other people who are walking this walk with us.
Oh yeah, I'm loving this. And I love to see how there's so much weaving that happens with all of the things that ignite our passion, right? Because there's some way in which the different things that we are called to do or feel invited to explore are connected. And a big part of the creative process is also to sort of pull that one string and see where it leads, and then discover how it's connected to this other one over here. And then we start to reveal like a broader tapestry that is holding it all together. And so as I'm hearing you speak about that and how one realm of our passion calls or requires this other one to support it so that we can understand it better or develop in it, or integrate things. I think about how I am starting to notice today, or at this time in my life, how much every single thing I've ever done contributes to what I am capable of manifesting today, or bringing form to today, or giving form to today. Whether it's through my service as educator, or my service with the dying and the grieving, or with my creative process. Like somehow every single thing that happened prepared me for it. And we also have this obsession with, we need to be prepared, and we need to study and read and all of these things. And sometimes we spend all of our life in that process of preparation, and then don't give ourselves the chance to actually discover that we can do it. And so it dawns on me that we are already prepared for that which is being asked of us, right? So if we are inspired to explore our own creative expression, to trust too that there's a way in which this is the next thing that's supposed to happen, and everything before it is there supporting it, and only in engaging with it will you discover exactly what of those things that you've already experienced and that give you the wisdom necessary are going to be called upon to make it happen. And this is happening to me right now with photography, because, as you may or may not know, I also had a career as a photographer for a while, and I did education in photography. And I thought that was done, right? So I have a film and paper from 15 years ago still in my refrigerator, and everywhere I move, I carry my cooler with ice to bring it to the next place. Because I'm waiting for that moment when the photographer will awaken again. Yes. But there was a part of me that had a huge grief, because I was a darkroom person. I was a large format film photographer. And so the access to be able to use that modality was zero 15 years ago. And so, after the big change into digital and all that stuff, but I've kept all my stuff. And if you keep it refrigerated, it's maybe going to last longer, all these things. And so I am moving now, and I was thinking, who am I kidding? I'm just going to throw all that stuff out. And as I was getting ready to officially give death to the photographer, it was totally reignited. I didn't even expect it. I was having a conversation in an end-of-life doula education space with a colleague, and all of a sudden, here I was coming up with a whole photography project. And I was so surprised and so excited at the same time. I had no idea I was still dormant in there, and it just woke up and it was like, yay, let's do it. And so we never know also, what are all the different things that are contributing to the right moment, right? So it's been 15 years. I didn't think it was going to happen. And the other thing that I'm realizing is how, looking back, now that where I am today, 15 years later, looking back at all the work that I did before I started actively working in end of life, there was a way in which the work was related to that. And so now I'm seeing what I did before from a new perspective that enriches what I actually did, and actually gives me that enough encouragement to say, yes, you can continue that with this. And it's still that, like I said, that tapestry holds it all together.
Yeah, and I think those periods of allowing ourselves to reflect, to pause and reflect is so important, because if not, if you were just sort of going through the motions, where you were staying only within your logical mind, you may have been able to convince yourself that that part of me, that part of my identity, that part of my life is over, and so I'm done, and here I am moving on. But instead, you gave yourself the chance to pause and reflect and have that openness just in case, knowing that your pacing might be something surprising. And then here it is, reawakening and ready for its new incarnation, its new iteration, whatever that's going to become, and how beautiful that is. I do think that practice of reflection and giving ourselves the time and space for it is huge. It's key. I was just leading a discussion, a live webinar within the Death Literacy Educator Program yesterday, and we were talking about preparing ourselves for leading people through death education events, whether it's one-on-one or whether it's a large group. And part of my process, I told them, is leading up to an event is I will try to just quiet the rest of life and give my mind some time to sort of percolate and brainstorm. And I will kind of plant that seed and set that intention, but I won't be forceful. I'm not sitting down with a pad of paper necessarily, but I just sort of give myself that permission and that kind of prompt, and then I see what comes up. And when I do that, I find that I've built a foundation of learning and study, which I think is really important. And yet that extra step of reflecting and thinking about, well, what does this all mean for me, to me? How has it affected me? And what is the potential for its effect for other people? And considering that part of it as we are creating in terms of, producing an experience or some sort of learning for other people is a really big part of it. We can't just robotically repeat things that we have learned. We also have to sit with it ourselves and really consider what effect it has had on our life, on our work, on our perspectives, before we can then think about how can I share this with other people in a way that it's going to land for them, and encourage that level of introspection within them as well.
Yeah, I love that, because again, it takes me to the way that I'm feeling it as you're talking about it is, okay, so all of these things have in some way informed me, touched me, but then something happens when it connects with me, my essence, my own experience, and what else now with this combination of what I have learned or what I can know, and then what the experience that I had and what I bring to it, what is that asking so that this new thing comes from that?
Yeah, that's alchemy. Right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I love it. Well, it is always a beautiful time when I get to share with you and get to be in your energy and get to be inspired by you and hear your perspectives. I'm so excited to be co-leading this next Inspired Ideation Retreat with you in May. Mm-hmm. And as of right now, we have one private room available and a couple of shared spaces. And this is a women's retreat happening in Florida in May. We have all the details on my website, but it's in early May. And we are welcoming women who are also either practicing and engaged currently with their own creativity, or who are really interested in reigniting their connection to their creativity. So I'm wondering, Wilka, do you have a project in mind for this year? Because we're not only facilitating, we are creating as well.
I know. So this photo project that just was born unexpectedly is something that I am currently in that space of allowing it to gestate. Like I had some initial sort of ideas and visions and I, whatever. And it's kind of like I put that into a little chest of, let's see how it begins to take form. And I'm going, it has to do with Puerto Rico, which is the land where I was born and raised. And so I'll be back in Puerto Rico for the Death Awareness Tour in February and March. And so during that time, I'm going to start building the imagery that goes with this project that I'm conceiving, or that is being conceived through me. And then I'll be working with what came out of that there. So I'm hoping to be working with that, and then starting to see how there's some writing that is going with that as well.
I love it.
So that's what but who knows? By the time that we get there, it could take a completely different form, but that's more or less where it's at. I'm also taking on another translation project, so I may take some time for that. But also, there are, you know this about me for years, that I have like several books that have
Mm-hmm.
been sort of, I have all the piles of notes and they're all, so we'll see, but that's another possibility.
Good. I love it. And the people who have signed up, they haven't finalized their idea. They have a couple, and I think that that's great to have that kind of openness and flexibility because I know for myself with my creativity, it does go through seasons, and
Hmm.
I imagine that I'm going to be done with this guidebook well before then and might be in the process of publishing it or bringing it out into the world by that point. And I don't know, actually, for me in May, will I be focusing on my own creative work about my own life that's just personal for me that I wouldn't share with the public? Potentially I'm always death journaling and adding to that for my own process. Or maybe there will be another work project that will be calling to me by that time. I do want to pull together, I have at least one other course idea, program idea that I have had on the back burner for a while that might kind of come forward. But yeah, we shall see, TBD. And it's just
Hmm.
amazing to be in a shared space with other people who are creating
Yes.
and to just be around that. It's wonderful, it's inspiring, it's rejuvenating, and I can't wait to see how it unfolds.
Yes. All I know is that it's going to be amazing.
Absolutely. Well,
Yes.
thank you, Wilka, for taking the time, for setting this up, for helping me through the technology. I
Yay.
will have to find a new way to set up my actual phone, but it's a learning
Yeah.
process.
And hopefully we'll have more of these until we
Absolutely.
get together in
Love
person.
talking with
Yeah.
you about any topics that have to do with living, dying, supporting, compassion, creativity, all of that.
Yes, me too. Thank you so much,
All right.
Francesca. And thank you,
Much love.
everyone. Yes, love you.